guys, it's Brittany. So today's video is going to be different, and as some of you may or may not know, I love the Scream movies. I'm a fan, and recently I've been reading the updates on Scream 5, and I've been really excited, and I've been reading some things about it here and there, and I was just so excited when I was reading about it and reading, okay, what could happen or who could be coming back, which I'll mention later. So I just thought, okay, I have to do a video on this. And I just want to share my thoughts on the updates of Scream 5 and give my opinions on what could happen in the movie and who could come back. So, okay, so recently when I was reading the updates of Scream 5, I was just like I said, I was excited. I'm like, oh gosh, like this is happening. And because yeah, I remember wanting to for that to happen for quite some time. And I just remember thinking, okay, there has to be a Scream 5 at some point, somewhere in the future. Like, there has to be. And so while reading these updates, I'm like, oh man, like, okay, I hope that's true. I hope that's true. So, what I did read about is that it could be shooting in the fall. Now, whether if they may shoot in the fall or maybe sometime, who knows, maybe somewhat early um, next year of 2021. If they do, I mean, either way, I really hope they do start filming. And if it is in the fall this year, then I will wish them luck and I will hope that they will stay safe, from what's going on of the fires and everything, and that they can start shooting in the fall as possible and all that. But they can't start filming until there's a story, and until there's a complete story of this movie with a full cast and just pretty much knowing, like them knowing, like, okay, these are the characters that are going to die in the movie, but here are the characters are going to be somewhat injured, but they're going to survive, and they're going to be the survivors in the story of Scream 5. So they would have to really work on that. I think they would have to pretty much work with the story on it and to come up with a really good one. And I think that the directors of Ready or Not, is it? Yeah. The directors of that movie, if they're going to do this movie and to honor it in Wes Craven's memory, then they have to do it in the most best way that they can. And I hope that they direct it and that there's a really good story. I hope it turns out to be like real big. Like, I hope it turns out to be one of those movies where you don't expect, that you don't expect of what to happen, of what you don't expect to happen, but then when it does, somehow it just turns out really great and it's intense and scary, and yet it just turns out really great. Like, it turns out to be like an epic Scream movie. So that's what I'm hoping for. Now, when I read about this too, I was somewhat confused and like, okay, how are they going to do that? But I've read that Matthew Lillard is going to come back as Stu Macher, and forgive me for saying this, but I thought, okay, how? How would he really come back as, the Ghostface killer from the first one? Like, how? Because first of all, he got killed off by Sydney in the first one. Like, when like after she hit him, like, oh yeah, after she hit him over the head with a boss, however you say it. So after she hits him over the head with it, he's laying on the floor, and the TV is like right next to him, right above his head, and she pushes the TV on top of him. So I'm thinking, how can he come back as Stu when that, when that was, his character. I mean, like when that, you know, uh, when that is very weird. This very weird off was character. Like, how is he gonna come back when she pushed the TV and it landed on top of his face? Like how it just squished his face with the TV. Like, I don't know. I mean, now if they somehow find a way to bring him back from that, then okay, the writers must be getting creative to somehow bring him back if he's coming back as Stu. But that's only if. So I'm just saying this, but if he does come back as Stu, I'm gonna be completely surprised, and especially knowing if we were to see him back, how his face would look, somewhat disfigured, and we would probably see some scarring on his face, from the TV. And another thing I read that got me excited, and I thought, okay, they should have done this a long time ago, but they never did. So the one thing I've also read, which I know some people would be like, oh, come on, like, just leave it alone. But I've read that Jamie Kennedy could come back as Rodney Meeks, and that maybe somehow he faked his death. Now, I don't know, somehow when I read that, that got me excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this is probably like the best news of the Scream 5 updates that I've heard so far, because when you think about it, in Scream 3 they were supposed to do that. Well, I think they were going to, but they did not do it, because I've read that they it was written in one of the Scream 3 scripts that they were going to bring Randy back, and that somehow he faked his death, and I think his parents helped him. I think he was living with his parents, and they were, I think he was living with them and hiding, and I think he comes back later in Scream 3, something like that. Now, I wish it could have done that, where we see him again, and then he survives along with Sydney, Gale, and Dewey, towards the end of Scream 5, and then we would see him again in Scream 4, and that would mean we would see him again in Scream 5. But because that never happened, then yeah, that's why things got complicated, and that's why things turned out the way it did without Randy. And to me, it was just completely unfair. And another theory, another thing I mentioned, what could be, which I don't know, I hope they don't do it that way, because then it would just make it seem somewhat worse. Because I've also read that if Randy had faked his death, that somehow he's probably the Ghostface mastermind behind all of this, like all the way back to the first one. I don't really see it that way. I mean, just because he is a movie buff, which I can relate to, I'm a movie buff, and even though he's also a horror geek as well, because he knows everything about horror movies and how to survive a horror movie, it's like, just because he knows everything about movies and even horror movies in general, that doesn't mean you have to make him into a bad guy, like into this mastermind killer, behind all the events that happened in 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like, that just sounds insane. Like, why make him like the most evil villain behind it all? Like, it just makes it seem like, I don't know, I think if they did do it that way, I would feel somewhat betrayed by one of my favorite characters, and I don't want to feel that way. You know, like, I don't want to feel like, oh gosh, like, just when I thought I could trust this character or look up to this character as a good guy, and now he turns out to be the most evil villain out of all of them. It's like, I'm betrayed. I'm betrayed here. And like I said, I don't want that, and I don't think any Scream fans or even those who like his character, I don't think they would want to see it that way. Maybe some do, but I personally don't. To be honest, I think maybe, let's say somehow if he does turn out to be a Ghostface killer in Scream 5, then if he does, then maybe he would only do it because he knows who are the real Ghostface killers are, and he's trying to stop them because he's trying to protect the other innocent characters along with his friends. I can see it that way, where he's more of the good guy and not the most really bad guy where you just end up hating him now. You know, like, I don't want that. So I hope they don't go in that direction. Like, don't. And another thing too, I know some people would say like, well, the thing is, how would he come back in Scream 5 anyway? He's dead. He got killed off in Scream 2. Well, let me let me be specific on what happened in Scream 2 here. Now, some of you may somehow have an open mind to what I'm about to say of what happened to him in Scream 2, and maybe some may not somewhat agree, but either way, just hear me out. Um, Now, in Scream 2, of course, Mrs. Loomis, who was Billy's mother, she was dressed as Ghostface, and she did kill or killed Randy and Gail's news van. But the thing is, she stabbed him four times. I remember I watched a video where a guy said that he was stabbed 37 times. No, not 37, 4. Because if it was 37, we would have heard that. We would have heard that many, you know, we would have heard that many stabbing sounds if it was 37 times. But no, 4. Like, it was 4 times somewhere like around up here. But, and as I read, someone can actually survive from having 4 stab wounds. And you may want to pause this when you watch Scream 2, but when you look at Randy, where the blood is all around his face and everything, his throat looks slashed, but not deep. Not deep enough where you see like an opening where there's just blood pouring out like this. Now, if it was, I think then that could have been like, okay, he's dead. There's no way he's coming back from that. But no, his throat was slightly slashed. Like, well, not really slashed, but like slightly where his skin of his throat was like almost like ripped off just a little bit, but it didn't do any physical damage to his throat, like right here. Like, it didn't do any damage to his throat or neck in any way. But you can see that his skin looked like was peeled off by the knife, just slightly, but there's still some skin there. So you can see that, but there's, like I said, there's no physical damage to that. So that's why, to me, I think that maybe. And another thing too, I know I'm kind of like going on here about the scene and everything, but another thing, when it comes to Randy's death scene, something just doesn't seem right. You know, it doesn't. Something doesn't seem right where you don't see what's going on. And that because of that, because you don't see how he's being stabbed and everything, that maybe it's somewhat possible that even though he could have been, injured, that yet he was not dead, that he faked his death. So, that's just what I'm guessing. But yeah, somehow his death scene doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't seem right where it's like, okay, he's now dead. It doesn't seem like that because, like I said, we don't see what's going on in the news fence. So I'm guessing that maybe they did that for a reason, or maybe I don't know. But I'm just thinking that maybe somehow his character could come back. And here's another thing too, as I'm gonna mention. It's a fun fact, but me, my sister Natalie, and our best friend Kelly. I remember. I think after Scream 4 came out in 2011, we were coming up with ideas for a story for Scream 5, and we even came up with this too, which I know we were quite like excited about. Um, but we actually had an idea on how to, bring back Randy and to bring up his survival story, and to bring up how that in his survival story that he was in a hospital for a while after what happened, after he was stabbed, and that his parents were there with him at the hospital, and that even though he was there at the hospital for quite a while to recover, and by the time he recovered and he was able to go home, that his parents had told him that he can no longer live a normal life, and he can't contact with Sydney, Gil, or Dewey to know that he's alive, because if he were to do that, that his life would be at risk again, and that this time that they don't want him to be where now he's really dead, you know, where he dies and and all of that. So that they don't want anything to happen to their son, so they keep him in hiding. So up until, like, he still does things, he probably gets a job, he still does things, but he doesn't live a life where there's Sydney, Gale, and Dewey back in his life again. But it's not up until Scream 5 where things starts to change in a way, and then, of course, at that point he's much older, and now he's like, okay, things are different now. It's time for me to come back, and it's time for me to show my friends. I have to tell them everything, and how I faked my death, and how I went into hiding for so long, and that now it is time for me to come back and to reveal myself that I'm alive. So we came up with that story, and I remember having written it down on paper, and this video is going a bit long. I'm so sorry, but it's just that ever since I've read about that, I'm like, oh gosh, like, oh, that would be great, to see him come back. But like I said, I don't want to come back like, oh, that he was the mastermind of all of this all along. Like, no, I would hate that. But I would love it if where he comes back and, he's more like the good guy. He's the protector of his friends and those other innocent characters in Scream 5, and that even once he finds out for those who are the Ghostface killers, that he will be the one, like, along with Sydney, Gale, and Dewey, and all that he'll be the one by their side, where they're standing together, and they're like, okay, let's do this, where it turns out very epic. And another thing that I read too is that Kirby could come back as well, and I love Kirby too, because she, she had her own personality, and at times she reminded me of Randy, Sydney, and Gale at certain times. No, I'm sorry, not Gale, but Tatum. So yeah, she reminded me of all those great characters at different parts of the movie, and so yeah, I don't know. And the thing is, even the way Charlie stabbed her, I don't think it did any damage where it could have killed her, because as we see that after he stabs her, he just throws her onto the ground, outside, I think out in the patio. I think it's a patio. But after he throws her, like she's laying on the ground on her back. She has her hands over where she was stabbed at, and yes, we do see her bleeding, but we don't see her laying still where it looked like okay, she's not moving, she's dead. No, she was still moving. She was moving, you know, like this, and because we see her moving, that shows it's possible that she survived and that she's going to come back. So I really hope so. Um, Another thing too, another hint of that could be possible that Kirby is alive and that she survived is that during the part of Scream 4 when Sydney is looking through the house, you know, to find Jill, because of course at this point she thinks her cousin is the innocent, um, she's like innocent, you know, just like a different version of herself. So she's thinking, okay, Jill's innocent, she's my cousin, I have to go look for her, but she doesn't know her cousin is the killer. But then at some point while she's looking through the house holding a butcher knife, um, she's about she's about to go down into the basement, but before she makes her way down, or before she even goes, you know, to the basement, she stands in the doorway of where the basement's at, and she's looking down the stairs and looking in the basement, and you know, of course she doesn't see Kirby there, so she calls out to her, you know, she goes, Kirby, because you know she's saying it because she's saying it like, are you there? But before she calls out to her, you can actually hear the door from the basement. You can hear how it opens and closes. Like, it's not too loud, but you can still hear it. And because you hear the door opening, to me, that's like a hint that Kirby is alive and she survived, and somehow we're gonna see her back in Scream 5. Oh gosh, this feels really long. I'm so sorry if I'm keep going on about this, but I'm just trying to point out here that I've been reading the updates and I'm just giving my thoughts on who could come back and all that, and that is shooting in the fall. So other than that, I just want to say I'm very excited. So of course I'm gonna keep reading more updates when there are new updates on Scream 5. So oh gosh, I really hope, I mean, to be honest, I really hope somehow they will find a way to bring Randy back and saying that he survived and faked his death. And I also hope that they find a way to bring Kirby back, you know, after how she survived from that stab wound, you know, after how she got stabbed by Charlie in like just that one time. Yeah, one time, but in the same place. But it's like, I hope somehow they bring them back. And I've also heard that it could be possible that there could be 3 Ghostface killers. That to me just sounds insane, but in a way it's like, you know what? I think that'll be somewhat good in a way, because it's somewhat of a challenge, because in this, like in Scream, you got 2. In Scream 2, you got 2. In Scream 3, you get 1. Scream 4, 2. So I think this time with 3, it's definitely going to be a challenge, and I hope with this, like with the story of Scream 5, I hope there will be like, I hope it will turn out really good with there's twists and turns, and somehow you're trying to guess on who it is, but then at the end it could be someone that you may have suspected, or it could be a character where you never even gave a second thought at all, and it turns out to be them. Like, that's what I'm hoping, like twists and turns, and it just turns out to be epic, but yet it just, maybe it ends on some of a good note, but I think somehow it's going to end quite sad. I do think so. I do think it will have a good ending to it, but I think it's going to end quite sad if one of the characters gets killed off, and then we're going to be left feeling sad. So So, but yeah, either way, I just want to give my thoughts and opinions on Scream 5 and who could be coming back and who I hope to come back. Like, oh, like, come on, they have to do this. They have to make it good and epic and make it where there's, like I said, twists and turns and where it just turns out great. So that's what I'm hoping for. And if you want to know more about how me, my sister, and our friend, if you want to know about how we came up with this story to Scream 5, and if you want to know a bit more about that, I could do a whole different video about that. And yeah, I could also try to do a video where we're like the three of us are talking about it in the video. So if you want to see that and hear more about it, I will do that for sure. So anyway, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what your thoughts on it and what you hope to happen in the upcoming sequel. And I'm just so excited because I've been wanting to hear about this for so long, and now it's just happening. So anyway, and support my channel on my Patreon page, which I will leave the link down below. So, oh gosh, I'm excited. I can't wait. So anyway, that's all for today, and I'll see you at the movies.